Welcome to Hope at Night, featuring Robb Long, Marius Morton, Q&A with our live audience, and host, Anil Kanda. Today's episode, which commandment do most people ignore? And here's your host, Anil Kanda.
Actress Lily Tomlin once said, "The trouble with the rat race is, even if you win, you're still a rat." If you've ever felt like you're constantly running on a never-ending hamster wheel, tonight's episode is for you. We live in a world that never stops. With long hours at work and our iPhones constantly dinging at emails and notifications, it's like we feel guilty if we're not busy doing something. But what if this world has a built-in gift that gives us permission to stop, to rest, and to reconnect with God and family? Our first guest was busy chasing fame and fortune as a collegiate three-sport athlete and a successful mortgage banker until he experienced a dramatic change in the direction of his life after he discovered the secret of the Sabbath. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Robb Long. Robb, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Could you share a little bit about how you grew up?
I grew up in western Illinois, a little town called Galesburg. My dad was a dentist there in town. My mom was a homemaker. And we lived basically a very good life there in western Illinois. My dad was a successful dentist. Mom was an excellent homemaker. And they kind of instilled in us, we had some good moral standards and work ethic and responsibility, things like
Robb,
that.
what was the driving motivation of your life as a young person?
Sports.
Sports.
Yeah, totally sports.
What kind of sports did you play?
If it was involving arms and legs and hands and feet, a bat, a racket, a ball, I was down for that.
So you were heading in this direction where you wanted to be a pro athlete?
Well, I played three sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball in an organized way on teams and for schools that I attended. And I did other sports on the side, tennis, swimming, track and field, things like that. But yeah, I think every young person that's really passionate about sports is hoping that maybe they can, be a pro athlete someday. I actually chose the college I went to. It was a smaller school because I could continue to play football, basketball, and baseball year round.
Now you also got into real estate as well. What was the motivation behind that?
Well, after I got out of college and I didn't become a pro athlete, then I had to find some other, way to channel my energy and something to give me meaning and purpose. And so I decided to engage in a career that I thought could make a lot of money and I could have material things. And I had some friends down in Texas, family in Texas, that I went down there. And timing wasn't real good, but I got into the commercial mortgage banking industry down there at a time when the market was a bit overbuilt.
Sounds like your life was going 100 miles per hour. What changed the direction of your life?
Well, it was a rebirth, a spiritual rebirth for me. And, anytime there's a birth, there's a little bit of pain involved, labor. And I think that as I got out of college and I couldn't play sports anymore, which would give me so much meaning and purpose. I was on teams and had teammates and always something to look forward to, something to celebrate, a victory. But when all of that went away and that was an empty part in my life, and then my career in the real estate industry wasn't that fulfilling, like I hoped it would be. And so I think God was just kind of preparing me then for a revelation of himself to me. And I kind of grown up, I classify myself as kind of agnostic, wasn't sure if God existed or not. But, the Bible says that faith is a gift. God gives to every person a measure of faith. And I distinctly remember a time when I was 25 that he gave me that gift of faith. I just knew that God does exist. Jesus became very real to me. And
This was like an epiphany that took place, things coalesced.
Yeah, just kind of an inward sense of
conviction.
And a burden lifted off of me as I realized I reached out to God and wanted to be saved, that, forgiveness of my sins. I felt a sense of joy like I'd never had in anything like sports or a career.
Isn't it fascinating?
A sense of peace.
Sometimes we're carrying things we're not able to exactly articulate or identify, and it's only when those things are lifted that you start realizing, this has been weighing on my soul for a long time.
Exactly. I didn't know that, but once it was lifted off of me, I just felt like one example is it affected me physically, because I used to run after work. I would have a course I would run, and I was always trying to better my time. And you reach a point in running that you just can't shave off very much time. But when I had that conversion experience, I went out and ran, and I shaved a whole minute off of my time. It was like I wasn't even touching the ground. I felt like I was just floating. It was amazing.
Wow, your theology not only affects your psychology, but your biology as well.
Right.
Rob, how did God begin to teach you about rest?
I learned about the Sabbath, and I did that one night or one afternoon. I was on my rowing machine, exercising and watching TV and kind of flipping through the channels. And for some reason, it was really providential, there was a program on. He was talking about Bible prophecy on this program. And normally I would have kind of clicked through there, but I was going through this experience, unbeknownst to myself, this kind of spiritual experience. And I ordered a book off the program. And I read the book, and I didn't learn a lot about prophecy, but something that really stuck out to me in the book was the Sabbath.
Now,
and a conviction that I needed to start incorporating that into my life.
For those that don't know, what exactly is the Sabbath?
Well, the Sabbath, the word means rest, and it comes from the Bible, the very first week of creation. When God made the world in 6 days, it says he rested on the seventh day, and he blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, made it one of the 10 Commandments, in fact. And it's the seventh day of the week when we are told by God to rest and remember him as the creator of the world, our creator personally, and hit the pause button, focus on spiritual things, not material things.
With the Sabbath now being part of your weekly life, how did it change or impact you?
Well, it was different, but I have to say that once I started keeping the Sabbath, I really had a sense of peace, and I felt like things that would worry me or bother me during the Sabbath just kind of faded away. God took those things away for 24 hours. And I really felt a sense of physical rest, mental rest, spiritual rest. And the Sabbath also connected me with people that are also, worshiping God. And I have found a church family through the Sabbath. Things to do with other people that were more spiritual in nature. Connected with the people that are living 8 years longer than the average population through some health practices that are kind of tied in with the Sabbath. Doing things that impacted the environment in a positive way. So it was just a totally positive experience for me.
Wow, it really seems life-changing. Now, if you go onto Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, any of these social media platforms, sometimes you'll come across these motivational videos about hustle. Work harder, stay up all night doing, your crafting, and just get better and more. There's just this intense focus on trying to improve by working harder, faster, better than anyone else. Does our world need a Sabbath?
I think our world needs a Sabbath now more than ever. Yeah. It's, you mentioned a rat race, and people are stressed out. We have all these time-saving conveniences, but we don't seem to have more time as a result of it.
By the way, I told myself this year, I was like, this is going to be the year that I'm going to slow down. And it's been completely the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And people are talking about helping the environment and having more time for family and less time for work. So, people are really, they may not know it, but they're expressing this need for the Sabbath in their lives.
What are some things you do on the Sabbath?
The Bible says to call the Sabbath a delight. And I looked up that word, it means luxury. And so the Sabbath should be a luxury or a luxurious part of our experience. So look at it in a positive way, not what you can't do, but what you can do. And since it is a memorial of creation, we can look back and think that, God made the world perfect, and He's going to restore the world that way one day, and we can look forward to that. Get out in nature, to think of the Creator, spend time with family. Bible calls it a holy convocation, a gathering of God's people. So, go to church and spend time worshiping with people, praying, hearing spiritual messages, sermons.
Life always seems out of balance. We're always searching for what balance is. I don't even exactly know what balance is, how you can get a definition of balance. But it just seems for many of us, man, if I could just only find balance, right? We always want that. And it seems the Sabbath is something that can contribute to finding better balance, or at least being more grounded when it comes to the craziness of life. Is that true?
I think so, yeah. Because as it's only one day of the week, but you kind of find yourself orienting your life and your week around that day, preparing for it, anticipating it, and then when it actually arrives, you can just enter into this space mentally and spiritually and even physically that you can't really get into with the busyness of the week.
What are a few things that the Bible says about the Sabbath?
Well, it says that it's a sign between God and His people, that we can know that He is the Lord our God, the Creator, by honoring the Sabbath as a sign. It's a day of rest. It's a day of you mentioned not sleeping all the time. So it's a day to do things for people that maybe don't have time to do the rest of the week. Visit people in the hospital or nursing homes. We'd like to go out and sing for people in nursing homes and just bless people, so do those things that you might not have time to do otherwise.
I can just imagine just the incredible impact it can have on one's life, that when you dedicate a day for God and for other people, it must affect you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, obviously, by this one day. We all need this Sabbath you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that kind of happens to you as you start keeping the Sabbath. All those areas are affected. You don't set out, I'm going to get mental rest today or emotional rest today, but it just kind of happens. Because there's a blessing in the Sabbath that God put in there.
A blessing?
Yeah, He said He blessed it. And so we can get that blessing by entering into that time and space with Him.
So there are promised blessings that come from God as we keep the Sabbath.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's wonderful. It affects you in every way of your life. What would you say to the person that's curious about the Sabbath?
Well, I would encourage people to just, try it. Just experiment with it. And remember that it is a positive thing. You're not giving up something, you're actually getting something better, which is always true with the things of God. And then just, start planning for it. The Sabbath biblically starts Friday night at sundown and goes till Saturday night at sundown. And so we get the shopping done, we get the cleaning, the laundry, gas in the car. If it's summertime, get the lawn mowed. And just get everything finished so that you can enter into that time when it actually begins.
It sounds like the way you view the Sabbath is not so much as a day of things you can't do, but a day of things, to do more of those good things.
Right.
And then it just has this wonderful benefit to your life. Is that right?
Yeah, and if you look at Jesus, He was the one that instituted the Sabbath, and He came and He actually lived it out and showed how to keep the Sabbath. And He was very busy on the Sabbath. Most of His miracles happened on the Sabbath. So, that's something to remember too. He's kind of our example of how to observe the day.
What did Jesus teach regarding the Sabbath?
He said, first off, He said He is the Lord of the Sabbath. And so He came to a people that were kind of treating the Sabbath as a legalistic thing. They'd invented all kinds of rules and regulations as to what you could do or not do. And they were kind of crazy things that they came up with. And He came and He kind of showed them how to keep it in a positive, spiritual way that got Him into some trouble because He wasn't keeping their traditions.
Now, hold on one second. You're telling us that the issue in the Gospels wasn't that Jesus was teaching people if you should keep the Sabbath, but how to keep the Sabbath.
Yeah, the question never seemed to be in the Gospels when you read them whether you should keep the Sabbath or not, but there was a big controversy over how he kept it versus how the religious people of the time thought that it should be observed. And actually, it actually says in the Bible that he broke the Sabbath. Well, he didn't break it, but he didn't keep their version of it. Yeah. So, it's interesting to look at that through the Gospels and see how Jesus was trying to redefine the keeping of the day that he actually instituted in the beginning. And he knows, how to keep it. Obviously, he did it perfectly, and he's our example.
What other things did he teach about what you should be doing on the Sabbath?
Well, he said it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And he gave an example: if your ox fell in the ditch, wouldn't you pull it out on the Sabbath? He healed people on the Sabbath, made people whole, he said. And just, I think he said, my Father's working and I'm working. So he brought true meaning and significance into the Sabbath. And it was a point of controversy, but I think it's something that we really need to think about how we observe it. Are we just doing it in a legalistic way with rules and regulations, or are we really focusing on him and the relationship with God that the Sabbath can help us have, as well as a relationship with other people that are trying to keep the Sabbath as well?
The way you're describing the Sabbath is something we all definitely need. A day of a mandated day off from God himself, right? Yeah. And a day that helps us to find just moments where we can slow down. We can lay aside the things of the world, the rat race. And it almost sounds like the Sabbath is a day we let go of control of these other things and put ourselves completely into the hands of God and rest with him in that process.
Yeah, people that keep the Sabbath sometimes are accused of pursuing salvation by works. But that's kind of ironic because that's the day you're not working.
Right,
you're resting.
Rob, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing more about the gift of the Sabbath and why it can be a blessing for every one of us. Rob's story reminds us that the Sabbath isn't about restriction. It's about freedom. When we return, we'll meet a former detective who knew about the Sabbath, left it, and then returned. His story right after these messages. Welcome back to Hope at Night. Our next guest has a colorful history. The great-grandson of a knight who fought for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he was born in Romania during the communist regime into an Adventist family that kept the Sabbath. After fleeing to America, he slowly abandoned his faith and Sabbath keeping, immersing himself into the study of music and his work as a private detective. Today, he is a police chaplain, a pastor, and an author of a book about the Sabbath, and he's still a musician. Let's find out what brought him back to his faith. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Dr. Marius Morton. So, Dr. Morton, you are a musician and you were a detective. How does that work out?
Pretty good. Because it balanced out stress with fun.
Wow, I can see how, when you're stepping away from the detective work, that instruments were probably relieving, therapeutic for you to play. What kind of instruments do you play?
Well, my major instrument is piano, but because I studied composition, so I play about 16 instruments.
Wow. Okay.
But not at the same time.
Now that's amazing. I want you to know I feel really guilty for not being able to play guitar after hearing you. Yeah. Now, as a private detective, what kind of work does a private detective do?
I was actually in college during the day at the conservatory, and a friend of mine, he offered me to pay for my detective training. So I went to detective training at night, and nobody knew. My parents thought that I'm in college. But they were 700 miles away. They lived in Atlanta, and I was in college in Ohio. So that's how I made it happen.
That's really interesting. Now, as a private detective, was this something people hired you to to investigate cases? I mean, what exactly, if you can educate me a little bit on what a private detective actually does?
Yeah, they do that, but I didn't. I worked for a private narcotics task force. So we were hunting drug dealers in East Cleveland,
Okay.
which
Really
is not the best neighborhoods.
right. And so you were playing instruments, and then you were also hunting down drug dealers.
Yes.
Wow. I can really see that as part of your persona right now. I want you to know that. Is it dangerous, or was it dangerous when you were living under a communist regime?
Yes.
What kind of dangers did you encounter?
I've seen people come to church from jail just because they wanted to keep the Sabbath. They came and searched our house twice because we were housing Bibles, which we're not allowed to do. We also housed the church instruments because both my parents were musicians. And so when they came to search our house, they would never give us warning. Even though, see, communism, it was a lot of bribery. They say half of the country was snitching. So, and my father, he was in good relationship with the police chief. But he told my father, if something happens, don't count on me. Don't even mention my name. But at least he gave him the courtesy that he came an hour before the search warrant to be executed. And he told my dad, you have 1 hour. So all the Adventist neighbors, they came together and they were distributing the Bibles and the instruments. So by the time they came, they found nothing.
Oh, that's incredible.
So,
You grew up as a Christian, and you obviously faced these kinds of persecution and danger growing up. What made you leave your faith?
well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I hope my mom is not watching.
I always say the same thing.
But because I was brought up very, maybe legalistic, so I wanted to rebel. And also because it was fun. I was 18 years old and I was a detective. That's cool. And so I was drawn into that world, and hunting drug dealers, you had to go when they worked. They were not respecting your schedule. So I became tired to go to church. I stayed home and slept.
Now, what eventually brought you back into the faith?
I have a younger brother who is also a pastor. And he decided at the age of 9 to become a pastor. And you see, I was 18 and I was still out there. And he's the only one that knew in my family what I was doing at night. And he would call me, he knew when I would get home. And he would call me every day just to check if I got home. And we would always finish the conversation with him saying, bro, I'm praying for you.
It sounds like he understood you were in a very dangerous kind of
Yeah.
work.
So one night, there was a drug dealer who didn't want to go to jail, and I almost got killed.
Okay.
And all the way home, I kept playing that scenario in my mind. And when I got home, my little brother called. And at that point, I said, I want to be with God. I don't know how long God will do this for me.
Wow.
So the next day, I went to my boss. I turned in the gun, I turned in the badge, and I said, I'm done. I went back to church.
Wow. So how'd you end up becoming a pastor then?
That's another story. I didn't want to be a pastor. I wanted to be a musician. And it was in my 4th year in the conservatory when I heard God's call. And I said no. But he kept calling. So at one point I decided to listen. And I set up a bunch of steps just like Gideon. If you do this, I'll consider it. So I went through the hiring process, and when my supervisor introduced me to the church, to the congregation, we sat down afterwards for a fellowship meal. And he says, I want you to know something. We had 27 candidates for this position. All of them have their bachelor's in theology, master's in divinity, but you got the job. I didn't have master's, and my bachelor's was in music.
That could have only been God then. Huh?
I give him the credit. He opened that door.
He knows how to make his calling very clear to us, doesn't he?
Yes.
You know, we've been talking about the Sabbath. What does the Sabbath mean to you?
A lot of things. A lot of things. Besides being the fourth commandment, and God says, remember that, it's interesting how at creation, God blessed it, hallowed it, and he rested. So he calls us to celebrate creation. It's a celebration. I look forward to the Sabbath. As soon as Saturday night comes, I already plan the next Sabbath because I want to celebrate. I want to be with God. And somebody just asked me, why is that different for you? Because you're a pastor. You're always with God. Yes, but it's different when you're on a date with your wife or when you're cleaning the house with your wife.
Yeah.
So the Sabbath is my date with God. And the second part, this is so cool. When Jesus died on the cross, he died on Friday. Again, he rested on the Sabbath. So the plan of salvation was complete on Friday. That means that after all this sin comes liberation. And that gives me hope. That gives me joy, something to look forward to.
Right. What a beautiful illustration there. And also you see in Genesis, right? After what God was done with the creation on the sixth day, on the seventh day, he rested, right? And there was just this time of reflection and appreciation and rest of what God has done.
Yeah.
You also wrote a book on the Sabbath. What's that all about?
I wrote a book on the Sabbath and music.
I can see why.
Because before I became a pastor, I was an evangelist. And I met a lot of nice people. I traveled preaching in 3 languages. And I got to preach in Romania, my home country, in Hungary, and here in the States. And so many people, sincere people that love God, and they want to serve God, but they are confused about the Sabbath. And there's so many theories why, the change. And so I decided to write a book and to show the joy of the Sabbath, not just the commandment part that you have to keep it, but why. And so in the book, I use a lot of stories from communism, how I met my wife, and how this relationship, with Jesus, the joy, and how you are committed to something that's going to be eternal. It's more than just this earthly life.
Right, and that's very true. The Bible talks about us keeping even a Sabbath in heaven. In regards to this idea, I think you're touching on it. There are many God-fearing people that go to church on Sunday. Many go on Saturday. There's some that go to Wednesday night prayer meeting. You name it, Tuesday night Bible study. But why is it that most of the Christian world ignores the Sabbath? Why is that something that is not thought of as people are going about their faith in the religion? And Rob, also feel free to jump into this.
I don't think I want to use the word ignore because a lot of people don't know. I actually have new members in my congregation that read their Bible and they realized, well, Saturday's a Sabbath. And that's how my grandma became a Sabbath keeper. I'm a 3rd generation. She was a faithful Baptist girl. And she was preparing for a Sunday. And one Saturday when she, this was before 2nd World War, she wanted to wash her clothes, her church clothes. It became blood red, the water. And she got scared. She thought she ruined her clothes. She called her mom and she looked at the water and they couldn't explain it. The father came, he looked at it, he says, I don't know what happened. And they called, the next door lived a priest. So they called the priest to come over and explain it to them. And the priest looked at it and he says, I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't do laundry on a Saturday. Telling this to a Baptist family.
Right.
The following Saturday, the mom was making homemade bread for Sunday when they come home from church. And when she sliced up the bread, there was a horizontal red line through the bread. And the family, again, was puzzled. What happened? And the priest came over again, and he said, maybe you shouldn't bake on the Sabbath. So the father said, okay, that's it. Let's pray. Maybe God is telling us something. They prayed, and within a few days, a colporteur knocked at their door.
What's a colporteur?
That was a guy who's selling books, Christian books. In the old days, they were going door to door selling books. And when he told them that he has Christian books, the father immediately asked, do you have anything on a Saturday? And he says, I do. He had one. And they bought it. In a couple of days, they read it. A week later, the guy came back with more books. Long story short, the colporteur married that girl. That's how my grandma became an Adventist, and the whole family.
Really fascinating. Rob, any thoughts?
I think it was Constantine, the Roman emperor, who made the first Sunday law in 321 AD. And from that point forward, it seemed like there was a gradual shifting from the Sabbath to Sunday observance. Came into the church, a lot of paganism actually came into Christianity around that time, and then in the Dark Ages, lots of traditions and customs came into Christianity that weren't really in the Bible. And you know, the longer traditions are observed, the more deeply entrenched they become, and people accept them without even questioning it or looking into it. But if you look into the history of the change from Sabbath to Sunday, it's a very interesting history. I'd encourage anybody to do that research. But I think the Sabbath has a prophetic role. As I've studied the book of Daniel and Revelation, I think it's an issue in the last days that God is going to bring to light. Part of the Reformation, you know, reforming the beliefs of the church away from tradition back more to a biblical faith. And I think the Sabbath is something God is restoring here in the last days as kind of the capstone on the Reformation, to point to the Creator, to get back to worshiping Him, keeping His commandments. And so I think it's something that more and more people are going to start recognizing, coming to understand, and then start incorporating into their lives. So I'm really hopeful that the Sabbath will become more widely known and practiced.
We definitely need it, right?
Yeah.
What would you say if someone says to you, yeah, but that's just a Jewish thing. That's something the Jews did. We don't need to do that anymore. We'll just pick any day you want. That's it. We don't need to worry about that. We're not going to be legalists.
Well, I would refer them to Genesis chapter 26, where Moses wrote that Abraham kept God's commandments. He kept God's statutes and precepts and commandments. And Abraham wasn't a Jew. So the commandments and the Sabbath existed before there was a Jew.
Yeah, the nation of Israel didn't even exist before that. Rob, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, just the same. It goes back to creation week before there was ever anybody that was considered Jewish. So it goes way, way back to the very first week of creation. And, you know, it's something that is deeply Christian when you think about it, because we as Christians believe that Jesus is the one that created the world. All things were made by Him. He rested on that first Sabbath. He came in the Gospels, and He showed us how to keep the Sabbath. And like we were talking about earlier, it was never a question whether the Sabbath should be kept or not, but more how to keep it. And so it's like a thread running through the entire Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation. You can find the apostles keeping the Sabbath in the New Testament. John on the island of Patmos was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Jesus said He's Lord of the Sabbath day. So it really runs through the entire Bible before the Jewish nation, and then well past into the New Testament era.
What does the Sabbath reveal about God's character?
The way God formed the fourth commandment, and He put it right in the heart of the 10 commandments, and it's the only one that begins with the word remember. And that's the one that's forgotten.
Right.
And God's character, because God, everything that the way God talked in the Bible, He talked in the language for His children, the Israelites, to understand. It was connected with their culture. And so the official seal of a ruler had to contain 3 things in order to make it official: the name, the title, and the territory of rulership. So when God put the fourth commandment with those words, I am the creator. I am God. And I rule heaven and earth and beneath the earth. God is saying, this is my official seal. This is how we, like I think he said earlier, this is a sign between you and me. This is a covenant. So that's God's character right there. It's a personal connection with God.
It's a revelation of who he is and his role to the entire universe. Say somebody has never kept the Sabbath, and they're like, okay, this weekend, starting Friday night, and all the way to Saturday sundown, I'm going to keep the Sabbath for the first time. You got any recommendations for them?
So the Sabbath, like we said, it is a rest, but it is also liberation, where we can leave all the world behind. I do touch my phone, but I don't engage in secular texting on the Sabbath. It's only if I have an emergency from church members.
You set boundaries.
Yeah, I don't check my emails on Sabbath. All my members know that. Don't write email on the Sabbath. I don't check it because I'm spending it with God. That personal connection, whether I have two teenage boys, we go out in nature, we do things together, but it is looking forward. Like one of the songs that I wrote about the Sabbath, that has 3 verses. Sabbath at creation, Sabbath on earth, and Sabbath on the new earth. So we have something to look forward to. And that's just awesome.
That's beautiful. Rob, what would you say?
Well, you know, you mentioned it says, remember the Sabbath day. And I like to think that word remember should take us in our minds all the way back to that first Sabbath at creation when God pronounced everything very good. He rested, not because he was tired, but just with a sense of satisfaction with what he had created. And of course, Adam and Eve were created on that 6th day, so he was going to have fellowship with them in the beautiful paradise they were now part of, and just that connected time. So yeah, there's the individual aspect of keeping the Sabbath, which is a blessing, our personal relationship with God. But then I would also encourage people to try to find a church that observes the 7th-day Sabbath and get together with other people that are trying to honor the Sabbath, because that's, in the Bible, you find the Sabbath like a holy convocation, a gathering. Jesus went to the synagogue on the Sabbath and participated in worship. And so that's a big part of it too, I think, is to not try to do it just by yourself, but get with other people that are doing it too.
Because you want to be surrounded by people who have the same mind, the same vision, the same goal.
Right. Heaven is a place they all want to go, so finding people who see that also as a goal, right? That's beautiful.
On that point you're just making, the Sabbath is kind of a example weekly, I think, of what life in heaven is going to be like. It's like once a week we get a chance to experience what eternal life will be like, more than we do there the 6 days. So that's something to think about too.
That's beautiful. Appreciate the conversation. This is really exciting when you're talking about the Sabbath. What a powerful discussion. Before we go to our break, I want to invite you to visit our website at hopetv.org/hopeatnight, where you can view previous episodes, download Bible study resources, and also get this season's free gift. So be sure to check it out. When we return, we'll open up the floor to some live audience questions for our guests. If you've ever wondered how to start keeping the Sabbath or what it really means, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've been talking about the Sabbath, a gift from God designed for our restoration and connection with Him. Now let's hear from our audience. Who has the first question? Right over there.
As a former detective, have you had moments where you've taken a critical or inquisitive view into theology? And if so, what insights do you have during those moments about Christ and our relationship with Him?
That's a good question. I had a close walk with God since childhood. I had a lot of experiences as a child because of communism, and I saw how God worked. So I never questioned God. I just rebelled against my parents being so strict. I always respected God, and I did have a remorse, or I was rebuked. I felt rebuked when I wasn't in church. But it was because of my parents, not because of God.
So when you worked as a detective, did you learn some skills there that continued to be with you and taught you other things about life and God and theology?
It gave me courage to stand up to people. As far as theology, I think now looking back, it brought me even closer to God, seeing how He was with me, how He was protecting me. And I still go after drug dealers, but now I go with the Bible.
Any other questions? Right over there.
Do you think it's okay to honor the Sabbath on a different day when there's something going on in your life, such as work or an emergency?
Rob?
You know, in the commandment, the fourth commandment says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It doesn't say a Sabbath day. There's a definite article. You know, if I say, hand me a book, you can hand me any book. If I say, hand me the book, you know, I'm speaking of a specific book. So I think there's one day that God specifically calls the Sabbath. That's the day that He's blessed and sanctified, and that's the day that He wants us to keep. You know, many people, we talked about keeping Sunday or another day as a day of rest and worship, which I think you can get a blessing doing that, just physically, mentally, emotionally. But I think for the best blessing, we need to really try to observe the day that God has set aside and blessed, and the one that He told us to keep. And sometimes that requires us rearranging our schedule, you know, and putting Him first. It says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and everything else will be added to us. And sometimes things like the Sabbath can kind of be a test of our faith. We step out in faith, we try to honor it, and then God shows us what He can do for us when we do that.
So, Rob, I get it. Let's say, for example, you know, your boss says, hey, I need you to come in and help with the roofing job on Sabbath. And we can say, hey, look, this is the Sabbath. I'm taking time off. But let's say there's an emergency that happens. Or let's say you're part of an emergency service. And let's say, for example, you know, the house next door is on fire. Do we wait till after sundown to deal with it?
No, I think that's where Jesus said it's lawful to do good, to save life. There are some situations, you know, you're driving down the road, you see somebody that's got a flat tire or a problem, it's a Sabbath. Personally, I would stop and help. You know, I think there's exceptions where we want to do good and be a blessing to people. But those are exceptions. Most of the time we should, you know, avoid doing things that we don't have to do that are unnecessary.
Right, and it sounds like what you're communicating is, hey, look, if it doesn't have to do with human survival, you know, wait till later on. But if it has to do with human survival, by all means, address it. And in doing so, you're even keeping the Sabbath.
Right.
When it comes to jobs, Sabbath keepers, they want to pick jobs where you don't have to work on the Sabbath. And of course, there are jobs that you cannot avoid. You cannot shut down a hospital. You cannot shut down a nursing home. And you mentioned that earlier, that's life-saving. And I have friends who work in the medical field, or firemen, or police officers. They try to arrange their schedule so they get Sabbath off. I know medical people who go in and try to get their rounds before church, and then they're at their job, they do their job, and then they go to church. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a matter between you and God. Mm-hmm. It's your relationship. What is God telling you to do?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Any other questions? Right over there.
Yeah, so I know you guys already kind of touched on, you know, having different jobs that might require you to work on the Sabbath. However, what if you have a job? What if you like choose your own day to celebrate the Sabbath? Can you do that? If you do have one of these jobs, can you just pick a day in the week and that can be your Sabbath instead of the day that's set aside?
Yeah, can you pick any day of the week, something that might be a little bit more convenient for you?
Why we keep the commandment is not really because it is the law. I keep the commandment because I want to please God. So like right now, when I'm traveling home, I will stop and buy dark chocolate for my wife. It's not because I have to, but because I want to please her. I want her to be happy. And I heard an old pastor saying, let's say you want to marry a girl from a family, and that family has 7 daughters, and you want to marry the 3rd one. And when you show up on your wedding day, the father decided to swap and give you the 6th one instead. And you say, doesn't matter? It's from the same family. They're all sisters. They grew up together. No, it matters to me because I love this one. So it's same thing with God. God blessed and hallowed the 7th day. And the book of Malachi, the book of Hebrews says that God does not change. He's the same. So I keep the Sabbath because I want to please him.
Beautiful. Rob, any thoughts you'd like to add?
You know, back when I was in the business world, when the boss called a meeting, you know, he expected us all to be there at that time. Didn't want somebody to say, well, I'll come on Tuesday, or somebody says, I'll come on Thursday. He wanted us all together. I think that gets back to the corporate idea that God wants his people to be together at the appointed time that he's set so we can honor him that way.
Right, and when you come to the other commandments too, right, we can't just sometimes pick and choose whatever commandment we think is great, or, hey, I can choose this God, but I won't have this God, and it's like, no, if you can't, God doesn't want you to compromise or readjust things for the other 9 commandments. Why would we do the same here?
Yeah.
Keeping the Sabbath does require a lifestyle change, but as I've heard today, in the end, it'll benefit you more than what you ever give up.
Right, on many levels.
Right.
Right.
Any other questions? Right over there.
Do either of you or maybe your kids ever get bored or feel FOMO from keeping Sabbath?
That's a good question. So our kids are adult children now, but when we did have younger children, I think it's important for families to try to make the Sabbath a very special time, especially for the kids. And so something to look forward to. I know my wife used to make a special dessert on the Sabbath that the kids could look forward to having, certain activities that are planned ahead of time, so that it becomes their favorite time, you know, rather than something to be dreaded. Is this almost over so we can get back to doing what we want to do? But you have to really make an effort, though, to try to make it a special time, that, especially for kids, because, and you know, just staying inside all the time isn't good, because they need to get out and move, and, you know, they get a little restless. So when the weather's good, especially getting out in nature, and, you know, you can do some physical activities too.
Right, and what you're saying is, you know, with FOMO, right, is fear of missing out.
Yeah.
The idea that, look, I could be missing out on so many things if I'm doing, you know, keeping the Sabbath. But you're telling us, look, the Sabbath is actually where you don't want to miss out, because you'll be blessed, you'll be able to do things, and then you can teach that to your kids so they can start loving the Sabbath and look forward to it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Any other things you'd like to add?
Yeah, when I was growing up, we had a long list of what you cannot do on the Sabbath. We didn't have a list of what you can do on the Sabbath. And besides all these activities, because now I have 2 teenage boys, it's our time of bonding as a family. Because during the week, we barely see each other. And so there are Sabbath games that we can play. We're out in nature if the weather's good. If the weather's bad, we watch the Animal Channel. My sons love animals. There are good Christian movies or books to read. So it's our bonding time with the family. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it seems much more structured, or at least carved. It seems like to be a time where you set some boundaries so as to not let the world invade and take over and separate and divide. And those boundaries, in the end, are for our own good and our family's own good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Right over there.
As we know, in general, the secular world does not respect the Sabbath. So I'm wondering, do we have a legal right to ask for exemption from work or school to observe the Sabbath?
Yeah, in the United States, especially, I can't speak to every country, but with our Constitution here, and of course we have the Civil Rights Act of, was it 1964, Title VII of that act prohibits employers from discriminating on the basis of various things, including religion. So in America today, employers do have to make a concerted effort to accommodate a religious request like that. So the law is really on the side of individuals that want to keep the Sabbath. They have to really show an undue burden on the company to refuse you that right to keep the Sabbath. So that's a good thing we have here in the United States, and I know that many people have taken that stand at work, and it's gone through the courts and, found in their favor. And, the denomination that we're part of even has a legal department that will defend people's right to observe the Sabbath up the chain of the courts, pretty much free of charge, I think, because that's how important we think it is that people have that religious right in the workplace.
And right now, it seems the law is on the side of favoring those that, hey, I want this time off, and to respect that time. And as you said, there's been obviously a series of court cases that have ruled in favor of that too.
Right.
And HR departments, they know this information.
Yeah.
So anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm happy to say that I had to give that letter to several members who've been working at a particular company for decades. And then decades later, they were told they have to come and work on the Sabbath. So I gave them a letter, like he said, and once they submitted, their Sabbath was given to them immediately, the Sabbath off.
Yeah.
Now again, we're not talking about medical or fire, those life-saving jobs.
Right.
But yes.
Appreciate you guys sharing that. Just that the fact that U.S. companies right now, they have to protect a person's religious rights. Yeah.
Maybe we should say something about an individual that's trying to do that. How would you go about that? I think the first thing to do is approach your superior at work and supervisor and make the request. And in making the request, I think it's important that we as employees and as Christians try to meet them halfway. Not come in a real demanding fashion, but say, hey, I just need to be off sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. At the same time, I'll work Sundays. If I need to work a holiday, I'll meet you halfway. I'm not just trying to get time off in a selfish way, but I do have the needs of the company at heart as well. We don't want to just be selfish about that.
Right. And if you honor God, He'll honor you. I've known of people, friends who actually, where they did most of their business on Saturday, and they took it off to honor God. And they ended up opening up on Sunday, the worst day of business, and it turned out that God blessed their company, and they did extremely well in the end. They honored Him, and He honored them, right? Any other questions? Right over there.
How do we encourage the people that don't know about the Sabbath day, or the people that know and have forgotten about the Sabbath day, and to remind them to engage and practice it without forcefully telling them, and just to be aware of it?
Yeah, start with you.
In my experience as an evangelist and a pastor, very few people are drawn to God intellectually. There are intellectual people who want to see the mechanics of theology and how that works and prophecy. Most people are drawn to Jesus on a personal relationship level. Okay? And so the best way that I found and I saw that works is when we show the example. When my neighbor or my friend or cousin, when they see that I'm excited, that how joyful I am, how blessed I am, that is contagious. And when they ask why, well, here's why. But I start with that by giving an example.
Yeah, and your example of itself communicates really powerfully about what the Sabbath is.
Yeah.
Rob, you got the last thought here.
Well, I think the concept of Sabbath keeping is coming more into vogue now. People are talking about this and the need for rest and how stressful it is. So there's a prime opportunity we have now to introduce the idea of the Sabbath. I like your idea of showing by example. Maybe invite them to join your family in Sabbath activities, attending church together, just let them experience that. And then there'll come a time, to actually study the Bible. And that's what I did. That's where I found the Sabbath. And I think that as people really see how important it is in the Sabbath, and it does run from Genesis to Revelation, it's important to God, they'll develop a conviction, like I did. Oh, I need to keep that. I need to honor that. And in doing so, I think you improve your relationship with God. I know I did. I felt like there's so many blessings in the Bible for those who keep His commandments. And when you start doing that, you'll realize that.
Wonderful. Thank you for this enlightening and inspiring conversation. Tonight, we've discovered that the Sabbath is not just a commandment, it's an invitation. It's God saying, come rest with me in a world that never stops. God has given us a way we can step back, be still, and remember who we are in Him. If you're looking for study resources on the Sabbath or other topics, please visit us at hopetv.org/hopeatnight. You know, God reminds us with every Sabbath that He is our Creator, He is our provider, and He is our restorer. He longs to give us rest for this life, hope for the next, and as always, hope at night.